For the next 20 seconds, picture this. A quiet farm at dusk, a signed contract on a kitchen table, and a black bull standing in a field like a shadow that refused to move. Everyone said he was worthless. The farmer said, "I don't believe in labels." By sunrise, 5 small signs would prove someone had lied. I bought the bull for $2,000 and told myself I was buying peace, not promise. He walked down the trailer ramp like he already knew my land, heavy and calm, breath rolling in the cool air. The seller spoke in a steady voice on the phone. "He's sterile. 18 months of test. You're safe." I said I didn't plan to breed. He said, "Good," and sent over a contract that read like it had been sharpened by a lawyer. There was a line near the end, small and neat. If the bull ever proved fertile, all breeding rights returned to him. I cleared my throat, asked, "Is this normal?" He replied, "Purely formal." I signed. That night my wife ran a finger along the paper. "You didn't read this closely." "I did," I said, though my eyes had jumped like stones over a river. "And if he isn't sterile?" "He is," I answered, and I meant it because the world had said so. The bull, Bran, kept to himself. He ate with a slow patience that made the other cattle settle. He did not chase, he did not posture, he did not test fences. When I scratched his neck, he leaned his weight but not his horns. A neighbor leaned over the fence one evening and asked, "Why pay for a bull that can't make calves?" "Because not every animal is for sale by the pound," I said. He smirked. "You'll change your mind." Weeks passed. I stopped counting them because nothing changed. Bran stayed quiet. The herd grew calm. I slept better. The vet came once, looked at him and shrugged. "He's exactly what you were told." My wife watched from the porch. "Then why do I feel like we missed something?" she asked. I said nothing. The line in the contract kept tapping on the inside of my head like rain on a window. One morning I found Daisy, my best cow, standing apart, breathing deeper, slow and careful. I put a hand to her side. She pushed back with a movement I could not explain. "No," I whispered. "Not possible." Behind me, Bran lifted his head and looked straight at me, as if he had heard my thought and chosen not to answer. The wind that morning felt strange, like something waiting. I followed Daisy as she moved into the shade, her body heavy with a truth my mind couldn't accept. My hand stayed on her side for long seconds, feeling quiet life shift under skin. "It could be feed," I muttered. "Or bloat. Something simple." But she wasn't sick. She was carrying. My breath caught in my throat. I whispered again, "Impossible." I walked back across the pasture with steps that didn't feel like mine. Bran stood near the fence, head lowered, chewing slowly. Calm as always. A bull that never acted like a bull. "If you did this," I said under my breath. He blinked, peaceful, like he didn't owe the world an answer. At breakfast my wife watched me stare at my plate. "Say it," she urged. "I think Daisy is pregnant." She raised her eyebrows. And I didn't bring a bull here. Not one that could." The sentence died. Her face changed. Fear, then shock, then something like pity. "Call the vet." By evening 4 more cows showed signs. I ran my hand down each side like a man searching for a heartbeat in water. One kicked at flies, another shifted with quiet discomfort, but all had the same secret. My chest felt tight. 5 impossible secrets walking my land. The vet came the next morning with tired eyes and coffee in his hand. "You sounded urgent." "I didn't breed them," I told him. "No rentals. No AI. Only Bran." He gave a slow exhale. "You're sure?" "I live here," I snapped, then softened. "There is no one else." He checked each cow and shook his head the same way each time, like disbelief was rolling through his bones. 3 to 4 months, he finally said. "You're telling me that bull did it?" "Yes." He stared at Bran standing quiet in the field. "This doesn't happen." "It did." He looked down at the ground. "You know the contract clause, right?" "I know." "And the seller?" He didn't know either, I said, though doubt pricked like thorns under my skin. My wife stood beside me, arms wrapped around herself. "So what now?" I watched Bran lift his head at the sound of our voices. The calm in his eyes wasn't gentle anymore. It was knowing. The vet cleared his throat. "Now," he said, "you need proof." I nodded, but my knees felt weak. Proof meant truth. And truth might cost more than money. Truth might mean we never owned anything at all, not even peace. "Your move," Bran's quiet stare seemed to say, though he didn't speak. And in that silence I felt the world shift again. I called the seller that same afternoon, though my hand shook holding the phone. He answered on the second ring, voice easy, casual, like nothing in his world was trembling. "How's the bull settling?" he asked. I swallowed hard. I need to tell you something. 5 of my cows are pregnant. Silence. Not surprise, not confusion, silence. My heart dropped. Finally he spoke, voice steady but thinner than before. That's not possible. They were never bred, I said. Only Bran has been here. Another pause. Then a controlled breath. Let's not jump to conclusions. My wife stood near me, arms crossed tight like she was holding the edges of the moment together. She whispered, listen to him. How he talks. He knew. No, I whispered back, but doubt crawled like cold water down my spine. The seller cleared his throat. Get the test done. Call me after. Not before. Then the line went dead. No good luck. No shock. Just instruction. I lowered the phone. My wife's voice was sharp. He wasn't surprised. I know, I said quietly. People don't hide shock that well, she murmured. We walked to the fence where Bran stood. Wind brushed through the dry winter grass. He watched me like he was waiting for me to understand something I didn't want to see. You changed everything here, I whispered to him. Without making a sound. He blew warm breath into the cold air, slow and calm. That evening the vet called again. We need a semen sample, he said. And I'll run DNA on the calves when they're born. I didn't speak for a moment. What if the contract takes everything? He paused like he was choosing careful words. Truth doesn't ruin good men. But it tests them. My wife touched my shoulder. You did right buying him. You'll do right now. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe this wasn't a trap disguised as a miracle. But fear gnawed in my stomach. Wealth doesn't frighten most people. Losing what they never expected to have does. That night, right before sleep, I looked out the window and saw Bran lying in the pasture, moonlight on his back, still and strong like he owned the night. I whispered into the dark, why here? Why me? No answer came, just the quiet truth of land and life. And the growing knowledge that nothing stays hidden forever. Not life. Not lies. Not fate. Tomorrow tests would begin. And whatever they revealed, there would be no going back. The vet showed up just after sunrise, boots still wet with dew, toolbox in hand. He didn't talk much at first, only nodded at me and walked toward Bran. The bull stood calm, tail flicking, eyes soft. If innocence had a face, it would have looked like his. But miracles rarely come without shadows. We'll take the sample here, the vet said quietly. My throat felt tight. And if it's positive? He didn't look at me. Then your life is about to change. One way or another. The collection took time. Bran didn't fight, didn't snort, didn't show the force a bull usually did. He stood like he understood this was not a battle but a truth being pulled out into daylight. When it was over, the vet held the specimen like it was something fragile and dangerous. I'll call you, he said and drove away. I stayed in the barn after he left. My wife found me sitting on an old feed bag, elbows on my knees, staring at dust floating in the sunlight. She sat beside me without speaking. Silence between us wasn't heavy, it was honest. After a long minute she said, soft and steady, whatever comes we face it together. I nodded because my voice wasn't ready. At noon the phone rang. I stared at it. Didn't answer. My wife handed it to me. Face it, she whispered. The vet's voice came through low, stunned. He's fertile. Very fertile. I've never seen a turnaround like this. Not by accident. My heartbeat thudded. So it's real? It's real, he said. And rare. Very rare. We both stayed quiet. Finally he added, you need to prepare. The seller will come for rights. As soon as I hung up, the phone rang again. Same number. The seller. I answered. So, he said cool and controlled, I got word before you did. Congratulations. I didn't breathe for a moment. You knew. His voice didn't waver. I suspected. Recovery cases exist. Slim chances but not impossible. And you never told me. You wouldn't have signed, he replied. And I needed to protect myself. My wife shook her head beside me, jaw tight, eyes burning. He used you, she whispered. I gripped the phone harder. What happens now? We'll discuss it in person, he replied. Tomorrow morning. I'll bring my attorney. Don't move the bull. Don't touch the cows. Then he hung up. The room felt smaller. The air heavier. My wife squeezed my hand. We didn't betray anyone, she said. We gave that bull life and peace. That matters. I stepped outside, needing open sky. Bran stood near the back fence, looking toward the hills like he saw farther than the rest of us. Trouble's coming, I murmured. He didn't move. Didn't shift. He just stared into the distance, calm as ever, like he had already survived every judgment the world could throw at him. And for the first time, I wondered if fate had brought him here not to bless us, but to test us. The night before they came, the farm felt different. Too still. Even the wind held its breath. I walked the fence line with a lantern in hand, not because I expected danger, but because worry pulled me like a thread through the dark. Every cow lay quiet. Bran stood in the corner of the field, head high, watching the road like he knew someone was coming for what lived inside him. My wife waited on the porch, arms wrapped in a blanket. "You think he'll take everything?" she asked. "I don't know," I whispered. "He has the contract. And we have the truth," she said, but her voice shook. "Truth doesn't pay bills. Truth doesn't feed cattle. Truth only sits heavy and waits to be tested." That night I barely slept. When dawn came, I heard tires on gravel. A white truck pulled up first, then another behind it. The seller stepped out wearing the same calm face he'd had the day he sold Bran. But this time he brought a lawyer, a briefcase, and intention. "Morning," he said, polite as a preacher on Sunday. I nodded once. My wife stood beside me. I could feel her anger humming like a live wire. He looked past me toward the pasture. "I see he's well." "He healed here," I answered. "He healed when he healed," he corrected. "Nothing to do with land. Biology surprises us sometimes." His lawyer opened his folder without greeting. "Under the contract, all breeding rights revert to Mr. Harris. We will inspect the calves and arrange transfer." I felt something sink inside me. All those mornings feeding, tending, believing, slipping away like soil in rain. But before I could speak, the seller raised a hand. His face had softened just a little. "Let's not rush." He turned to me. "When I sold him, I believed the test. Truly. But 3 months later I saw a case. Rare, unexplained recovery. I should have told you. I didn't." My wife whispered, "So you hid it." He nodded once. "Fear makes us selfish." The lawyer shifted uncomfortably. "Sir." "Be quiet," the seller murmured without looking at him. Then back to me, "I didn't come here to steal. I came to see who you are." I didn't understand. "What does that mean?" "You called me," he said. "Most wouldn't. I know men in this business. They'd milk that bull in secret and bury the truth deep as rock. But you," he breathed out slow, "you chose honesty over fortune. That's rare as this bull." Silence hung between us, thick and real. "So here's what I propose," he said. "We split the rights. 50-50. You keep every calf born on your land. We file joint ownership on his line. I'll cover legal work and breeding management. You keep the bull here. If he stays happy, he stays fertile." His lawyer's face drained. "This is not." "Do it," the seller snapped. "Honor has a cost and I'm paying it." My legs felt weak. I looked at my wife. Tears had filled her eyes, but she smiled, small and tired. "You see," she whispered. "Truth doesn't ruin good men." I swallowed hard and nodded. "Deal." The seller held out his hand. We shook. "Solid." "Real." His lawyer reluctantly pulled new papers from his briefcase. My wife fetched a pen. As signatures dried, I looked out toward the pasture. Bran stood there, sunlight warming his black coat, tail swishing slow. Calm. Certain. Like he'd always known this ending. I didn't call him lucky anymore. Luck breaks easy. What he carried, what we carried now, was something different. Something earned through patience, faith, and the hard work of not giving up when everyone else already had. For the first time since he arrived, I spoke his name like a blessing. "Bran," I whispered. His ear flicked. He lifted his head, proud and gentle, a king in quiet soil. The papers lay between us like a bridge made of thin trust and thicker hope. My wife took them inside to make copies, and the seller and I stood in the yard, neither speaking for a while. A rooster crowed somewhere down the road. The morning smelled like hay and frost and something new, like life had changed but hadn't said it out loud yet. He finally cleared his throat. "I wasn't the villain you thought. I didn't say you were. You didn't have to." He looked tired then, not older, just worn from carrying silence. "Too long. I lived through a dry season once. Nearly lost everything. When I saw that research, fear grabbed me. I told myself you'd never know, never be harmed." He paused. "But fear makes fools of honest men." I nodded. "And truth fixes some of them." He cracked a weak smile. "Sometimes." My wife returned with the copies. "Everything's signed." He tucked his papers into a folder and looked at Bran across the field. "You chose the right land," he murmured. "Some animals need quiet to rise again." When he left, the gravel dust settled slow behind his truck, and the world felt still. Not empty, settled. My wife wrapped her arm around mine. It happened, she whispered. We kept what mattered. I walked to the fence, boots heavy but heart light in a way I hadn't felt in months. Bran grazed under the old oak, sunlight laid across his back like gold. He looked peaceful, but there was strength under that calm, strength the world once called useless. You changed my life without asking, I said softly. Bran didn't lift his head, but his ear turned toward my voice, the way trust shows itself on quiet farms. Later that afternoon, the vet returned to collect more documentation. He leaned on the gate watching Bran. Never seen anything like this in my life, he said. Me neither. You think he knows? That he's rare? I shrugged. Animals know survival. They know loyalty. Maybe that's enough. He tapped the papers against his hand. A bull everyone called worthless, and look at him now. Sometimes people need time, I answered. Sometimes life does too. He nodded, then glanced toward the lane. Folks will hear. This kind of miracle doesn't stay quiet. I sighed. I don't want crowds. You won't get crowds, he said. You'll get envy, curiosity, offers. Some good, some not. I watched Bran lift his head, nostrils flaring at a breeze only he understood. Let them come, I said quietly. We didn't cheat. We didn't hide. We earned this. The vet smiled. That's the kind of ground good things can grow from. When he left, I stood alone a while longer. No fear this time. Just gratitude that felt like a warm weight in my chest. The sun lowered, painting Bran in orange light. There, in that gentle moment, I realized something simple and strong. Miracles don't always roar. Sometimes they chew grass in the quiet and wait for you to notice. The first evening after the deal, peace settled on the farm, but it wasn't the same peace as before. This one carried weight, responsibility, promise, and a quiet warning that blessings came with eyes watching. I stood by the pasture fence as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows that stretched like paths toward tomorrow. Bran moved slow through the grass, each step solid. He didn't seem like a bull anymore, he felt like history breathing. My wife came up beside me carrying 2 mugs of tea, steam curling in the cool air. Feels different now, she said. It does, I replied. You scared? A little. She bumped her arm into mine gently. Fear's just proof you care about the outcome. I smiled at her words, but inside my chest, there was something heavier than fear, a sense of being chosen. Not by luck, not by fate, but by the simple act of believing in something everyone else dismissed. That's a powerful burden and a humbling one. Around dusk, the neighbor who once joked about Bran being useless drove by slow, window rolled down. He didn't say a word, just stared at Bran like seeing him for the first time. Pride tugged at my chest, but pride and humility sat side by side in that moment. That's how real victories feel. Inside the house, we sat at the table, papers still stacked neatly at one corner. My wife traced her fingers over them. Do you ever think, she murmured, that miracles don't show up as sudden luck? They show up as living things you have to care for, protect, and believe in long before they bloom. You just described farming, I said softly. And marriage, she added with a small smile. Later we stepped back out. The sky was turning purple, the first stars waking. Bran was lying down, big body still, head resting in the grass. He looked content. And I felt a warmth flood through me, because somehow we hadn't just saved him. He had saved us too. Not in dollars, not in land, though those would come. But in proving something deeper. That patience is a seed. That faith is soil. And sometimes what grows surprises everyone. I whispered, barely louder than the breeze, "You're home, Bran." He didn't need to answer. Some acknowledgments don't come in sound. They live in the peace that settles after storms, the quiet that follows truth, and the steady comfort of knowing you stood on the right side of integrity when it mattered. Tomorrow would bring calls, plans, pressure. But tonight, the sky was gentle, the earth calm, and hope lay thick on the air like dew waiting to form. And for the first time I felt ready, not to be rich, not to be known, but to be responsible for a miracle that had chosen to live here. The next morning came slow and gold, sunlight slipping through the curtains like it was careful not to disturb what had just begun. I woke before the rooster, not from worry this time, but from a kind of alert calm, like my mind understood the road just widened and I needed to walk steady. My wife was already awake, tying her hair, eyes soft but thoughtful. You ready for whatever today brings? She asked. I think so, I answered, though part of me knew nobody is ever truly ready when life turns a quiet corner. We stepped outside, boots crunching frost. Bran stood near the trough and when he saw me, he gave a slow nod, almost human in its knowing. I leaned on the fence watching him drink. There was something in his posture, gentleness holding strength, that made sense only to people who've lived close to soil worry and small victories. My phone buzzed. A breeder from 2 counties over. Word traveled fast even without us saying a thing. I didn't answer. Not yet. Some things need breathing room before the world starts tugging at them. My wife poured feed into the buckets and spoke without looking up. People will treat you different now. Maybe. They'll call it luck. I sighed. Luck didn't get up at 5 a.m. every day for years. She smiled. That's the truth. We worked in quiet rhythm as we always had. Chores don't pause for news, not on farms. The cows moved slow, their bellies rounding with promise. One nudged my arm like she knew she was at the heart of this story. I scratched her neck. You girls started something big, I murmured. As we finished, a small truck rolled up the drive. Not the seller, not a lawyer, just old Mr. Turner from down the road. He stepped out, hat in hand, eyes soft with curiosity. Heard something, not sure if it's truth or gossip, he said. I didn't deny it. It's real. He nodded, thoughtful. When land blesses a man, folks will try to claim the rain. I let those words settle. Farm wisdom always sounded simple, but it carried weight like iron. He looked at Bran and chuckled softly. World threw him away. Then he came here. Strange how God hides value in plain sight sometimes. Before leaving, he squeezed my shoulder. Hold your ground. You earned this. When he drove off, I exhaled slow. My wife slid her hand into mine. People are watching us now. Let them, I said. We didn't cheat the soil and we didn't cheat anyone else. In the pasture, Bran lifted his head and the morning light caught his horns like a crown. And right there I understood something simple. We hadn't just been given fortune. We had been entrusted with proof that patience sees what the world overlooks. And blessings, like bulls, don't always arrive polished. They grow in silence, rise in time, and test the soul that receives them. The following week moved like honey, slow, steady, sweet but heavy. Each sunrise came with new calls, messages, voices from towns I had never stepped foot in. People who once brushed past me at livestock auctions now wanted advice, partnership, opportunity. Funny how the world turns its head only when it smells value. But I learned early that not every knock deserved an open door, and not every smile carried good intentions. I turned most calls away. Not yet, I said again and again, because I wasn't ready to let strangers shape something that had grown quietly under my care. My wife made tea every evening and we sat on the porch listening to frogs and crickets like we always had. Simple habits grounded us while life stretched in strange new directions. One afternoon a young man from a nearby dairy farm stopped by, shifting nervously. Sir, he said, I heard about your bull. I've got a calf. Folks said he ain't worth much. But sometimes I think there's more in him. I looked him in the eye. I saw the same worry I once carried, the fear of betting on something everyone else had turned their back on. Care for him, I told him. Not because of what he might give you, but because of what he already is. He nodded, grateful. Sometimes advice works best when spoken plain. That evening my wife and I walked the pasture together. The grass whispered under our boots. Cows grazed slow, calm, untouched by human noise. Bran stood near the old oak, tall and quiet like a guardian carved from obsidian. His presence felt bigger now, not heavier, just deeper, like time sat differently around him. I used to think success arrived loud, my wife said softly. Like applause. It doesn't, I replied. It arrives quiet, in chores and patience. She smiled. And in bulls nobody wants. We reached the fence, and Bran finally walked toward us, heavy steps pressing into soil that remembered struggle. He stopped close and I rested my hand against his neck. His skin was warm, heartbeat steady, a rhythm older than ambition. You didn't change, I whispered to him. The world just woke up. In the distant fields, twilight settled like a soft blanket. Cattle moved slow, tails flicking, jaws chewing. The world didn't rush, not here. And I realized that was the blessing. Quiet land, honest work, and a miracle that unfolded not with excitement but with patience. Somewhere inside me, fear loosened its grip. Tomorrow might bring new eyes, new plans, new pressures. But tonight the world belonged to dusk and gentle breathing and peace earned, not given. Bran's ear twitched. He didn't speak, but his stillness said enough. Value doesn't need noise. It needs time. The seasons turned without asking our permission. Spring rolled in like a soft apology for winter's sharp edges. The pastures turned deep green, dotted with wildflowers, and the air filled with the steady hum of new life. Our 5 calves ran clumsy circles in the field, legs too long for their excitement, like future champions who hadn't yet learned how to carry the weight of potential. Bran watched them the way old kings watch young heirs, calm, proud, steady. He didn't boast, didn't strut. Strength doesn't brag when it knows its own depth. My wife leaned her head on my shoulder as we stood by the fence. "They're beautiful," she whispered. "They're beginning," I murmured. Word had spread by then. Quietly at first, then louder. People in town stopped me with polite curiosity. Some with admiration, some with envy, a few with false congratulations that tasted like vinegar behind their smiles. Success is a silent magnet. It pulls praise and jealousy in equal measure. I stayed humble because the soil teaches humility better than failure ever could. The land doesn't care who praises you. It only rewards those who return each morning, tired but willing. One afternoon, the former seller, now partner, returned. He leaned on the fence watching Bran and sighed. "You kept him better than I would have." I shrugged. "Sometimes value grows in places it wasn't planted for." He nodded. "And sometimes a second chance rests in the hands of the right steward." He told me breeders across the country were asking about Bran's line. Numbers floated in the air, figures I never imagined would be tied to my farm. But as he spoke, I just kept my eyes on the pasture. Money is loud. Peace is quiet. I learned long ago which one feeds the soul. Before he left, he said softly, "You know, if you had hidden those calves, if you had lied, nobody would have known." "I would have known," I replied. My wife squeezed my hand. "And he would have known," I added, nodding toward Bran. The seller studied me for a moment, then smiled, not the tight business smile he wore before, but a gentler one. "You did right," he said. "I tried," I answered. "Often that's enough," he replied and left. That evening, fireflies blinked across the field like tiny lanterns celebrating quiet victories. My wife and I sat in silence, letting the night wrap around us. The calves settled close to Bran, safe in a world they didn't yet understand. And sitting there, on that old wooden bench, I realized something simple and strong. This story wasn't about money or contracts or rare genetics. It was about seeing worth where the world refused to look. Waiting where impatience would have walked away. Believing when logic whispered no. Some miracles don't arrive with thunder. Some just walk into your pasture one afternoon, head low, breath soft, and change the horizon without raising their voice. For months, life moved in a rhythm only farms understand. Slow, steady, and honest. Yet even in peace the world kept knocking. Letters came first, then farm trucks rolling up the drive, men with polished boots and clipboards offering numbers that made my stomach twist. They spoke fast, smiled wide, and praised Bran like they'd known him when he was just a forgotten bull. But loyalty isn't something you sell in an envelope, and I didn't answer most offers. The soil had taught me value long before money came looking for it. One afternoon, a reporter arrived without calling. She stood by the gate, notebook in hand, shoes too clean for mud and spring ground. "We'd like to tell your story," she said, excitement pushing each word forward. I shook my head. "Some stories don't need cameras." "But people want to hear it," she insisted. My wife stepped beside me. "Wanting isn't the same as deserving." The reporter left with more questions than answers. Fame wasn't what we were chasing. We had enough, the kind that touched heart, not headlines. Later that evening, clouds rolled in, thick and gray, the kind that brings sudden rain. Thunder rumbled far away, gentle, not angry. Bran stood tall as the sky shifted, his calves huddling close to him. I watched him, thinking how storms never scared him. He had survived worse. The storm of doubt, the storm of rejection, the storm of being underestimated. "You changed this farm," I said quietly. My wife rested her hand on my arm. "He didn't change it alone. You met his patience with your own." Raindrops began to fall, slow at first, then steady. We hurried the cows into shelter. Bran waited until the last calf moved, then followed behind, steady and sure, like he understood guardianship better than most men ever could. Inside the barn, the sound of rain drumming on the roof filled the silence. The calves nuzzled close to Bran, trusting without question. Trust like that is rare, earned one quiet decision at a time. My wife brushed hay from her hands. "Everything we have now, it came because you didn't give up." "No," I answered softly. "It came because he didn't give up." The rain eased. A thin sunbeam slipped through the clouds, lighting Bran's dark coat. He looked almost unreal, like strength wrapped in grace, like a testament to second chances the world nearly threw away. And in that moment it hit me. True worth isn't proven when everyone believes in you. It's proven when no one does. The world had dismissed him. I had simply listened to quiet possibility. And sometimes that's all a miracle asks for, someone willing to hear it before it speaks. The year unfolded like a long breath. The calves grew strong, their bodies filling out, muscles shaping under slick coats. They carried Bran's calm eyes, his steady stance, his quiet dignity. Watching them was like watching living proof that patience is never wasted. You just don't always see results when you want them. Visitors kept coming, some well-meaning, others hungry in ways that had nothing to do with cattle feed. Offers rose like summer heat. My wife joked once that if we stacked all the proposal letters, we could build a new barn. But we didn't bend. Wealth earned slowly rests easier than wealth grabbed fast. We knew that much. One warm afternoon, a younger farmer stopped by, bright-eyed, hopeful, hands calloused from honest work. I saw my old self in him, back when uncertainty clung to every dream. Everyone says my bull ain't good enough, he told me. Weak line. Waste of feed. I leaned against the fence and pointed at Bran. They said the same thing about him. The young man studied Bran for a long moment. So what changed? He got time, I said. And a place that didn't judge him before he had a chance to show who he was. He nodded, shoulders easing like someone had just lifted something heavy from them. Guess that's worth more than opinions. Always is, I replied. When he left, my wife whispered, you used to need someone to say those words to you. I smiled. Back then, I didn't know patience was a skill. And now you teach it without trying. Later that evening, we walked the pasture again. The grass glowed gold, cows grazed steady. Bran moved with confidence. No rush, no noise, just presence. If peace had a shape, it would have looked like him walking against the sunset, calves shadowing him close like a quiet procession. My phone buzzed again, another high number, another shiny offer. I stared at the screen, then turned it off. My wife raised an eyebrow. You didn't even check the amount. Doesn't matter, I said. Some things don't need selling. They need protecting. She exhaled slow. Feels like the world is trying to talk us out of what we already know. They can talk, I said. Land listens only to those who work it. Bulls too. Above us, swallows swooped low across the field, stitching the sky with soft wings. A calm settled over me, deeper than relief, acceptance maybe, understanding, gratitude. Bran pawed the ground once, lifted his head and looked straight at me. Not pride. Not challenge. Just connection, pure and simple. The kind that doesn't fade when money calls. I leaned on the fence and whispered, I didn't save you. You saved me from thinking value needs noise. A soft breeze carried the scent of clover. The world felt right, earned not borrowed. Miracles don't always announce themselves. Sometimes they graze quietly beside you, reminding you what faith looks like when it grows legs and breathes. Summer settled like a warm blanket, thick air humming with life and memory. Grass stood tall, swaying like it knew secrets, and the calves, now taller, stronger, galloped across open pasture with the confidence of creatures carrying a legacy they didn't yet understand. I spent mornings leaning on the fence with a cup in hand, not counting dollars in my mind, but blessings in footsteps, breaths, and quiet mornings earned one sunrise at a time. Neighbors who once waved politely now lingered longer at the gate, eyes drifting toward Bran like pilgrims looking at a shrine they didn't fully believe in yet. Some asked careful questions. Some said nothing, only staring at him like they were trying to read fate written in muscle and bone. One day, a man from a well-known breeding ranch came, hat low, posture stiff. He cleared his throat. They say you're sitting on gold. I shrugged. Gold doesn't moo. He cracked a smile, thin but genuine. Fair enough. Still, most folks sell when fortune knocks. Most folks don't get to choose peace, I replied. He looked at Bran again. If you ever change your mind, I'll let time decide, I interrupted gently. It always does. He tipped his hat and left without argument. My wife watched from the porch, arms crossed and satisfied. Proud of you, she said. I'm not sure pride's the right word. Maybe not, she replied. Maybe it's certainty. Hard-earned certainty. That evening, a soft rain rolled in, not the kind that threatened but the kind that blesses. Thin drops tapping leaves, stretching smell of wet earth into the air. Bran didn't move to shelter. He stood in the rain, calm as ever, letting water thread down his coat. The calves stayed close, trusting his stillness like the world's safest truth. I walked out and stood beside him, rain soaking my shirt, boots sinking slightly in mud. Funny, I murmured, everyone thought you were the end of a story. Turns out you were just the quiet start of one. Bran blinked slowly, tail flicking once. His silence wasn't empty, it was complete, whole, honest. Some creatures speak louder without a single sound. My wife called from the porch, "You're getting soaked." "I've been soaked by worse," I called back, smiling. She laughed and shook her head, the screen door squeaking shut behind her. In that moment, just me, rain, earth, and a once-forgotten bull, I felt fate settle. Not dramatic. Not loud. Just steady. Like soil accepting seed. People think success changes life fast. Truth is, it changes you slowly like seasons changing fields. One choice. One belief. One moment of patience at a time. A bull the world rejected stood as proof in front of me. Worth is not given, it's revealed. And sometimes what the world calls failure is just potential waiting for the right place to breathe. Autumn came quiet, like a soft sigh across the land. Leaves shifted to gold and deep rust, drifting down the way memories do, slow, gentle, full of meaning if you pay enough attention. The air cooled, mornings crisp enough to remind me that time keeps moving whether we feel ready or not. The calves were nearly grown now, broad shoulders forming, calm eyes steady like brands, living proof of a miracle the world once refused to believe in. One evening, I sat on the pasture fence watching them graze. Bran stood a few yards away, powerful but peaceful, tail flicking at the last flies of the season. My wife joined me, hands wrapped around a warm mug. "You ever think about that day?" she asked quietly. "The day you signed that contract?" "Every now and then," I answered. "You regret it?" I let the question sit in the cool air. "No," I finally said. "Regret doesn't belong here. Fear lived here once, but regret never found a home." She nodded slowly. "Funny how life makes room for the things you feed. And starves the things you don't," I added. Just then a pickup rolled down the lane. It was the seller, now partner, again. He walked over with a file tucked under his arm. But today he wasn't here for business. He leaned on the fence next to me, watching Bran with a soft expression I hadn't seen before. Not pride, not calculation. Something like gratitude. "You know," he began, voice low, "I used to think strength was loud." "And now?" I asked. "Now I know strength often whispers. It waits. It listens. And sometimes, it stands in a field eating grass while the world argues about worth." We shared a quiet laugh. My wife smiled from her seat. He cleared his throat, glancing down at the file. "Breeding contracts finalized. First program starts in spring." I nodded. "We'll be ready." He hesitated. "You ever think, if he had recovered while still under my care, I might have ruined him? Rushed him? Seen profit before peace?" I looked at Bran, steady as the earth beneath him. "Some miracles need the right soil," I said. "And the right hands," he replied, eyes meeting mine with rare honesty. As the sun dipped low, painting the sky in fire colors, we all fell silent. Not because we had nothing left to say, but because some moments deserve quiet. Across the field, a gentle breeze stirred leaves, and the calves nudged each other, playful and strong, unaware of the history they carried in their blood. I thought about how different life could have been, how easily the world had almost missed this. How close Bran came to being just another forgotten animal. How close I came to never knowing what faith and patience could look like carved into flesh and bone. My wife rested her hand on mine. "We were chosen for this," she whispered. "Or we chose it," I said softly. "Both can be true," she replied. And as twilight settled, the farm breathed in slow harmony, soil, cattle, wind, heart. Everything balanced, everything earned. Moral lesson? I didn't need to say it out loud. It lived right there in front of us. Sometimes life gives its greatest gifts to those who don't rush, who don't give up, who see value not in noise or speed, but in stillness, patience, and quiet belief. Those who stay. Those who wait. Those who trust. Whatever the world had planned next, we were ready. Because miracles don't come to those who chase them. They come to those who stand firm enough for them to find a home.